Councillor Vickers join us at any time. And I will ask you to join me in a moment of reflection as we consider the business of the corporation. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest at this time? Seeing none, anyone can declare at any time throughout the proceedings. And I would ask for a mover and a seconder to move into closed session as we discuss a third-party service provision. Councillor Bartley, Deputy Mayor, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And joining us in this session will be the CAO, the clerk and treasurer. And we will move into the boardroom. Closed session, and the staff and council attended that closed session with the CAO, the clerk, and the treasurer in attendance. And at that session, the council gave direction to staff to not proceed with a potential third-party partnership opportunity. So with that, we are back into open session, and we will begin with announcements. Any announcements from anyone around the table? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and happy to begin with what I think is a bit of very good news. Recalling that Council agreed this year to support the Big Apple with some funding, and on the first weekend that the Apple was open, there were over 200 visits to the Apple. At different points in time, there were actually people in line to get information from the Apple, which is really exciting. And the most often asked questions apparently were, where was the best place to eat?
And did you tell them?
If I'd have been in the Apple, I would have. But anyway, that's off to a good start, which is terrific. And I just thought I would add, because I love going to these concerts, coming up this Saturday, the 29th of June, will be the first Leith concert of the summer season with Christina Ziabo. And she's a mezzo-soprano with the pianist Robert Courtgard, who's absolutely amazing. The concert will be called Music for a Summer's Evening, beginning at 7:30 at the Leith Church. So highly encourage folks to go and enjoy the music out at Leith. And I believe they have new cushions this year, so going to be much more comfortable, and they've added air conditioning.
Air conditioning. Thank you, Shirley. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm quite certain that you have quite a list of Canada Day activities to bring forward with announcements. I'm just going to pick one that's not going to happen down at the harbour, but it is going to take place at Beautiful Joe Park on Monday from 12 to 4. Beautiful Joe, everybody knows where that is on Edwin Street. It is entitled The Ultimate Stunt Dog Show. That's about all I can tell you, other than it features some stunt dogs, and I understand there may be a special guest star being a cat at this performance.
A stunt cat?
There will be pet experts, pet vendors, a scavenger hunt, and I'm not sure if that's for the cat or not. But anyway, it should be a lot of fun. Dog show at Beautiful Joe on Monday. Thank you.
Dog and cat show sounds like. Thank you, Harley. Cat and dog. Anyone else? As I do have a list of Canada Day, Canada's birthday coming up this weekend. First one off the mark is Sunday, June the 30th from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Opening ceremonies are at 7:30 in the evening at the Ann and Ball Diamond. Celebrations with a live band, food, raffle table, kids games, and colossal fireworks at dusk. All events are free, but donations to the Optimus Club are welcome. And of course, they're the ones who put this on. Canada Day celebrations in the urban area will be in Meaford Harbour this year, Monday, July the 1st, starting at 9 a.m. With the breakfast. We have the Military Family Resource Centre pancake breakfast. Also 9 till 10 a.m. yoga with Beth Rotty on the break wall, and music by Victoria Ye. I think we've seen that, a repeat performance of that. 11:30 to 12 is the flag raising ceremony with the Golden Heirs singing our national anthem. And of course, the traditional cupcakes will be available then. 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. is the library fun and games. And 12 to 4, there's lots going on. The dock will be there, Zoo to You, face painters, Grand River inflatables, fire truck visit, and the Canada Day market. 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. is the Rotary food tent, and 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. is the Rotary beer gardens. We have Revolve hula hoops starting at 1 o'clock, and the Sail food truck will be there from 5 to 10 p.m. And from 6 to 10, we have live entertainment. Victoria Ye again, Emma Wright, 5:45 to 6:30, 6:45 to 7:45 is Drew McIver duo, and 8 to 10 is Horseshoes and Hand Grenades and Friends. Bogner also kicks off our Canada Day, Monday, July 1st, 6:30 p.m. to 10:30. Again, live music, games, log sawing, horse race, bowling, and more. And display of the Walters Falls Classic Cars, food booth, and Canada Day cake. And again, fantastic fireworks display at dusk. In addition, we have the Net Shed is open Friday for the weekend, 1 p.m. to 4, as well as Saturday and Sunday, 10 to 4 p.m. And that begins in July. Connect to Skills program, Monday to Friday from July the 8th to August the 2nd. That place is to be determined, but we'll let you know on our website. It's a free 4-week course led by the 4-County Labor Market Planning Board to prepare unemployed or underemployed individuals for a job in the hospitality and tourism industry. Participants will gain the essential skills necessary to succeed in entry-level jobs while also receiving valuable certifications such as SmartServe, Safe Food Handling, WMIS, Customer Service Excellence. And following the 4-week course, we will help set participants up with a paid 2-week job placement in the Meaford community with the goal of long-term employment. More information can be had at Kayla, K-A-Y-L-A, at planningboard.ca, or Jordan, Jordan, at planningboard.ca. The last one is Friday, July 26th at 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m., the traditional Rotary Club fish fry at the Meaford Harbor again. And this is the annual event, always very, very well attended. You can buy tickets online at www.meafordrotary.ca or at Stuff to Read, Dairy Queen, Grandma Lamb's, or McGinty's Cafe. Adults are $20 and children under 12 are $10. They are requesting this year that you bring your own reusable plates, cutlery, and cups. And thanks to Lindy, I'm sure you had a hand in that for environmental. And that's it for announcements. And with that, we will move on to public participation. We do encourage members of the public to provide council with your comments and questions, but we ask that presentations be pre-arranged with the clerk's department before the agenda is released. And members of the public who wish to make a deputation about a specific agenda item are certainly welcome to do so or to ask a question. Deputations are limited to 5 minutes each, please, because we have generally a very busy agenda to follow. And public questions are limited to 2 minutes per each. And we do have a list. We know we have some folks here today who would like to address council. And so we have a deputation from Joan Grierson to start. Welcome, Joan.
Sorry, Your Worship, if we can start with Mr. Plumstead from Grey County.
Of course. Joan, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to ask you to sit down for a second. We forgot our presentation before we jumped right into deputation. So sorry. Well, Bryan, that's what you get for being here 1 minute before. I miss seeing you. Welcome, Bryan. My apologies.
Thank you so much. And first, I should check, is it really 5 minutes per presentation?
You're good.
I was okay for 10.
Presentation
Okay, I think that was, because I must be getting old. I used to have 15 minutes with councils, but I haven't been here for a few years. So I will be speaking very quickly. I hope council's okay with that. Really, my purpose today is to just reinforce the importance of tourism. I know that Meaford is very supportive of tourism through your staff, through your initiatives. You've got so much going on. So I'd just like to talk a little bit about what's going on right from the international level down to Ontario, a little bit about what we're doing at Grey County, and then finish up in Meaford. And I will do that in 10 minutes. And do I have a clicker or do... Okay, so maybe can I just snap for the next slide because we're going to be moving quickly. Thank you. So first off, tourism internationally has been growing, what is tourism? Let's start with the definition of tourism. Probably a lot of the words on that slide you identify with as top-level tourism, but if we can move to the next slide, we really have a very simple definition in Ontario, and this is consistent with international use. Anybody who takes an overnight trip or any same-day trip of more than 40 kilometers for non-routine activities. That's what we call a tourist. It sounds very simple. The trouble comes when we try to separate tourists from residents. If we're trying to count number of jobs or investment or expenditures, that's where it gets really tricky. But it is a very simple definition. So if we can move on to the next slide. Internationally, around the world, tourism has been growing at an average of 6 to 8% per year. So it's really taken off since the last recession. But if we go to the next slide, while Canada had its best year last year, over 21 million visitors, we only grew 1%. So we're not really keeping up with the world pace. The US is still our biggest market overwhelmingly, but over the last 20 years, they've dropped from 80% of our market to about 68%, and international visitors have increased to about 38% now of our visitors. UK is still our biggest overseas market, but China is growing fast and will probably overtake them in the next year or two. Then several other European countries and Southeast Asia, and Ontario and Canada do a big job in going over there to try to encourage those visitors to come here. So if we can go to the next slide. In Ontario, unfortunately, our stats are always a bit out of date, so we have to go back to 2016, but 26.8 billion in visitor spending, using that definition that we just talked about. And out of that, 11.8 billion is tax revenue. So the tourism spend really gets very heavily taxed. Food and beverage, especially liquor, gasoline, highly taxed, and then accommodation taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So tourism really does bring a lot of revenues into our respective levels of government. About 144 million annual visits in 2016, 391,000 jobs, and 188,000 businesses. So next slide, please. And that's really due to, we have a great position in North America, so over 140 million consumers within a day's drive, so that makes us very accessible to the US, and increasingly through Pearson, we're getting more airlift from these foreign markets. Next slide, please. So I think I'll go right on to the next slide, and just, next slide, please. Talk about, the tourism industry is quite hard to understand sometimes, and I often, when a new tourism business comes in, there's so many different levels. So on the left-hand side, we have all the partners in tourism, and on the right-hand side, our consumers. If we start at the bottom, our businesses, our operators, those are the most important people, because they're the folks who actually greet our visitors, do transactions, are the front desk, the welcoming face of tourism. Here in Meaford, you have a variety of, I call them municipal support organizations, your chambers of commerce, BIA, South Georgian Bay Tourism, many service clubs that put on a lot of your events, and of course you, the municipality, have a huge role in tourism. A little bit up above is Grey County. Our main job is to bring people into Grey County and circulate them around. RTO7 is the regional tourism organization, Bruce Grey Simcoe. They operate across the 3 counties of Bruce Grey Simcoe. And then above them, there are sector associations like Attractions Ontario, Resorts Ontario, the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs, to name a few that are active in this area. And then the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, TIO, is an umbrella advocacy organization. I happen to sit on the board of TIO at the moment. Destination Ontario is the provincial art marketing arm, so they're a separate corporation, but they get most of their funding from the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, which is our provincial parent ministry, and then Destination Canada at the top, which basically their job is to bring people into Ontario. Ontario's job is, into Canada. Ontario's job is to bring them into Ontario and spread them around, and down we go. So, as you can see, it's very important that we really align and work together, especially from, say, Meaford through Grey County through RTO 7. That's really the sweet spot of bringing people into our communities, making sure they're spending money and supporting our local businesses. Next slide, please. So we are a department at the County of Grey, and we have 3 full-time staff people, 2 students in the summer, and hopefully you'll see them around Meaford this year as they are every year, attending events and doing a lot of social media to promote Meaford and other places in Grey County. If we go to the next slide, we also have a tourism advisory committee, which are 5 members chosen from across Grey County, mostly from the tourism industry, who meet with us quarterly along with 2 representatives from County Council, and we're very pleased to have Shirley Keaveney, your Deputy Mayor, sitting on TAC, and Shirley's just been a great asset. She's got lots of questions and always brings a great representation to this part of Grey County. So next slide, please. We also have a group of DMOs, or Destination Marketing Organizations, people who have full-time tourism staff from across Grey County. And again, it's great to have Steve Murray at our table. Steve always keeps us updated to what's happening in Meaford and participates in our thinking as we try to make sure that we're in touch with local initiatives and local priorities. Next slide, please. So we do have a Destination Development Action Plan, and our 3 staff people, each of us heads up 1 pillar in the plan. If we can go on to the next slide. Pillar 1 is all about talking to our stakeholders, our partners, our businesses, and our municipalities across Grey County. And this year we undertook a very comprehensive Tourism Matters campaign where we really tried to talk about the importance of tourism, the number of jobs, the expenditure in Grey County. And we went around during that week and took photo opportunities. So we're glad that we could catch up with some of you here for a quick snapshot. We also have an industry website and many other activities under that pillar. Pillar 2 is really our big one. It's all about destination marketing, our product development, our experience development. So that includes our website, our social media, some of the activities we're active in. Cycling is a big one for us, the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail that comes right through Meaford, promoting that and updating that. Next slide, please. So these are a few shots from our Coloring Up My Way campaign last year. We had some great Meaford content from well-known folks like Grandma Lambs right down to Hannah Davies, who is a young person. You might know her mom is very active in social media and works for RTO 7. So this is really telling the story of what to do in Meaford through the eyes of its local residents. Next slide. And just a couple of posts from across Meaford, mostly last year, and we'll be attending many of the events again this year. So next slide, please. And then my pillar is about industry research, tracking, and reporting back to our Tourism Advisory Committee on our deliverables, making sure we're doing what we said we would do. Next slide. So if we look at the tourism industry in Grey, we can really unpack it into the demand, that is the people who are visiting, the supply, which are the businesses, the commodities we produce, the tourism industries, and then the benefits that accrue back to Grey County and Meaford. So if we go on to the next slide. These are stats, again, we get from the province, 2.7 million visitors in 2016, and that's just domestic visitors, not including US and overseas. So it's a pretty big number. Next slide, and they spend, why they come, 53% come for pleasure reasons, and that's very high across Ontario. So that really is indicative of the fact that we have a lot of great attractions, activities, things to do. 32% visiting friends and relatives, that's VFR. So again, it's very important that we're talking to our residents, making sure they know what to do when the family and friends come to visit, and hopefully that they're also good ambassadors and help us build tourism here. And then where people come from, maybe we'll go on to the next slide. We'll do where they come from in another moment. 1,300 tourism-related businesses across Grey County, so it's about 13% of our total. And next slide is our expenditures, $337 million. And interestingly, how is that breakdown? Well, food and beverage is the biggest tourism spend. So a lot of people, when they think of tourism, they don't think of food and beverage. But Mayor Klumpus, when I heard you say at the Big Apple, people were asking where to eat. Well, that's exactly it. That's one of our biggest tourism expenditure markets is food and beverage. Accommodation is next for us at 18%, transportation at 17%, retail is another huge part of tourism, and again, we often don't think of our Main Street retailers, but they're in the tourism business as well. And then recreation, entertainment, things like Meaford Hall, attractions, things to do. So next slide, please. So 8,868 jobs in those tourism-related businesses, about 20% of our total. And out of that, 2,800 jobs are directly supported by visitor expenditures. And that generates about 3.1 million in municipal taxes at the Grey County level. So if we can keep rolling, and I'll try to finish up quickly. So if we come down to Meaford, I don't think this is any news, but tourism is huge at driving investment, new economic impact, preserving our heritage and growing our communities and our overall quality of life. Next slide. So we often think about the direct impact of tourism, but in behind that are things like manufacturing, finance, and real estate. A lot of our agricultural product flows through into the tourism market, so the total impact of tourism is really important, even though it's often out of sight. Next slide. So this was an abstract idea of actual visitors to Meaford. I drew a geofence around the downtown and the harbor for the year 2018, and we were able to plot where they come from. So we see a very consistent pattern to most of the rest of visitation to Grey County. Most folks coming out of the GTA, Kitchener, Waterloo, Guelph, and London, and Barrie, and then sort of a smattering across the rest of southwestern Ontario. These are our visitor markets. And the neat thing is, behind this data, we get postal codes, so you can actually see, are they families, are they young folks, are they a bit older, and the kinds of things that they're looking for. Next slide. Then using the same methodology, we can look at tourism businesses in Meaford, about 119 we count in the various sectors. A lot of that, again, is retail trade, department stores, grocery, and other services includes automotive repair. So again, there's a lot of sort of what we typically think of as tourism businesses that actually support the tourism industry. And then next slide, if we look at jobs, pretty much the same story, 462 jobs. And next slide. So Meaford is blessed with many tourism opportunities, and I think this is really no news to you. Steve is actively working on a lot of these files, and then some we're assisting with at the county level. And then I think the next slide is we're almost there. Also, we have some challenges and workforce issues, being attainable housing and transportation. Our challenges right across our economy, but they're particularly acute in tourism. And I think you're aware that the tourism industry has been leading and doing some of the work on some of the solutions to those. So I think we'll go on to the last slide because I think my time is up. And thank you very much for your time. And we're all looking for a great summer. We think summer is here. We've had our order in for months, but we think we've finally got the weather coming our way.
Well, we hope that you have more influence on that than the rest of us do, Bryan. Thank you so much for your presentation. We certainly recognize how important it is. Okay, thanks again, Bryan, for your attention today and for coming and joining us. So now we can move on, and I can ask you back up again, Mrs. Grierson, to tell us what you're here about. Welcome.
I wasn't really expecting to do this today, but seeing that the fellow that called me is not here. So I am going to say something. I presented a petition in 2016, which I never really had a comment or a reply. I kind of figured it was filed in the garbage. If we had done something at that time, we would not have the issue today. Saying that, this is what I think. I think of the people who are buried in Meaford Cemetery, where the forefathers and the people who built this town. So I believe we owe them the respect to care for their resting place. Saying that, I hope you will have a look at this in the future to see what we can do better. I just wonder, does anyone ever check on these contractors that do the grass, that were hired to do the grass cutting, and is it to your satisfactory that they do what they do? I see it, it's not to my satisfactory. So, one more thing, I think Station Hill, the Town Hall, and the Harbor are areas that need attention. They are our focal point for visitors. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Pearson. Appreciate your comments. And the next one we have is Diane Steves. Welcome, Diane.
Welcome, or good afternoon, thank you. Basically, I was going to speak about the cemetery as well, but the lady that spoke before me voiced all my concerns. So
Okay.
apparently it is something that a lot of citizens are annoyed or disturbed about and don't feel it's up to the standard it should be for a graveyard or for a cemetery. But that's basically what my concerns were as well.
Well, I thank you for that, and you, I'm sure, are aware that we have a further discussion on this subject coming up under the agenda today. So
Thank you.
so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you, ladies. Okay, Janine Nixon, we have. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, thank you. I've been up here in the past complaining about things, so I thought maybe today I would be here to thank people instead. And the group that I would like to thank is the Planning Committee, so Rob and Kirsten and Liz. I was quite happy to receive the latest email pertaining to the land transfer request at Kingston Beach. I want to thank the group for doing all the hard work, research, and listening to us, because we came as a group, we addressed you, we sat at the round table, and I believe we were heard. And so I would just like to, I hope that all of you as council who are making the decision today pertaining to that land request will certainly take into full account all the research that has been done by the Planning Committee, and I would hope that you will deny that request for the land transfer. And also, I was at the meeting for the Leaf Pub, and I know we had a huge turnout for that. And I believe that our land transfer is possibly setting a precedent for that land transfer as well. There's a lot of similarities pertaining to that. Anyway, thank you for letting me be heard, and I appreciate, again, all the research that's gone into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, and thanks for the compliment to our staff. It's well deserved. Okay. Bryan and Barb Sherby. Okay. Welcome.
I'll talk, yeah. My name's Bryan Sherby, and I'm at Kingston Beach as well, where the subject's going to be tabled later on about the land transfer. I'm at the Lot 1, and it's on the page 3, at the bottom page 3, where they actually specifically talk about us. But I'm here to thank the Planning Department and specifically Deputy Mayor and Councillor, I guess, Greenfield, and as well, you coming down and actually seeing the site. That, I think, you know exactly what why we're against this. And also, when you do look at page 3 and page 4, they do talk about the ditch. And I hope something will be done. I don't know what I should do going forward, that they will actually work on that so I don't get flooded out this winter. I do go away in the winter, and usually my kids or my neighbors, they tell me, well, guess what, your basement's being flooded again. And this ditch is coming from side road 23. I hope that, I don't know where to proceed to see that gets done through the summer or fall before we go away. But thanks to everybody for answering the emails. I guess the 3 of you anyways, you know who you are, and coming down to the site and seeing what it was. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, Brian. Appreciate your comments. Okay. Rito Ruclo? Hi, Ruda. Sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm not a great public speaker, so I think I'll just read my notes.
You're just welcome.
There's a bit of frustration involved with this, so I'll try to keep it as close to my notes as I can. My name is Rita Rudo. Terry Caesar and I have purchased our home 25 years ago. I'm here today because I do not know how to proceed with our issues. The issues are the maintenance of the 16 side road in the municipality of Meaford. When we purchased our home, we understood that there was no winter snow removal on the portion of the road that leads up to our driveway. Over the years, there have been many issues regarding this. We actually had winter snow removal periodically in the early years. Over time and several staff changes, the services or the upkeep of this municipally owned road has changed. We have several documents indicating that Meaford would maintain the road, but not during the winter. We have our home up for sale, and the municipality has provided documentation to a interested purchaser that there is no maintenance whatsoever to this road. These potential purchasers lost interest in pursuing this property as they could not get any building permits. So since then, we're concerned about the false information that was provided to a planner in Collingwood from staff in the Meaford office. I'm asking for direction how to proceed with this. We met with Mayor Klumpus March 14th, 2016, and we still haven't had a response from that meeting. I involved the Ombudsman of Ontario to see if I could get some minutes from the meeting that we had. That went nowhere. And here we have, again, the frustration. When we left the meeting, Mayor Klumpus said, well, we have a list of things to do, but we never heard what those lists were. We talked about signage. We talked about a great number of things because of the situation that was created when the information that ended up on the internet said that 16 Side Road goes over to the 18th, Grey County Road 18, and that it was an open road. We were having transport trucks turning around in our driveway because their GPS says it's open. Again, we have never had any kind of clarification what was going on. There was promises of signage. There's been no signage except for when we purchased the home 25 years ago, at the bottom of the hill where there was a turnaround spot created from the former owner, there was a sign that said no winter maintenance beyond this point. One day I came home, the sign was down. Now it's no maintenance whatsoever. So just by changing a sign should not change the level of service. So I'll go back to my notes. We have had regular grading, meaning that when the grader is out grading the gravel roads of the municipality, the driver automatically drove up to our driveway or up the hill where what the issue is for the winter snow removal. So we've had them come up automatically. We've had others turn around at the turnaround spot at the bottom of the hill and not grade the hill, and I'd phone them and they would come back out the next day. It's not a great, it never made sense as a ratepayer with the time efficiencies. If they're already there, it's another 20 minutes to go up the hill, grade it, and come down and be on their way. Instead, they would come back out the next day, all the way from the yard, and come up, just do the hill, and leave. So we've had that. But this is between the misinformation and this last little bit. Last fall, Darcy Chapman did not think we should get any grading to the road anymore because he thought that we had moved, so there was no grading from the spring of 2018 until just recently, May 27th of 2019, after speaking with Cynthia Nolan. Now, we do have documentation from Grey County. We also have documentation from the municipality of Meaford indicating that there would be maintenance to this road. Not a leveled increased when they severed the 5 acres off this property, but it would be maintained at the same level. This is clearly not what's happening. And because, I'll read you the list of people that we've involved over the years. There's Mr. Rob Armstrong, Liz Buckton, Phil Taylor, Jeff Fries, Brian Gilroy, Gerald Short, Perry Ramsey. I'm sure there's somebody else, but I think that's quite a list. And at this point, the frustration level is unbelievable, and I'd like to know how we can proceed with this, because I still pay my taxes to this municipality. This is a municipality-owned road. It's part of the Tom Thompson Trail, and the level of service, other than this one grading in May, there's been none in a year, over a year.
Thank you, Rita. I do remember that meeting that we had. That was a few years ago now. And yeah, I can see why 3 years later the frustration level would be pretty high. I'm just wondering, Rob, do you want to respond and set up a meeting with Rita?
Yeah, there's, as Rita has identified, there's a lot of history with this regard. I know there was a lot of confusion on the level of maintenance. We have been reviewing it with Cynthia, as she has mentioned, in discussions. We can provide a full scope of our understanding of it. There was, in 2007, a letter from then the Director of Operations on identifying what level of maintenance that the municipality would provide. And that clarification was made to the proposed purchaser on that level of service. It was corrected on identified, so we did identify that and have been, my understanding, following it, and that's what Cynthia is reviewing right now, so we can respond to that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much, Rita, for that. If that will suffice at this point, we'll get back to you from Cynthia.
No, actually, it doesn't suffice. Jeff Fries did send me a copy of this letter dated October 22nd, 2007, indicating what level of service there is. But Mr. Chapman and Mr. Fries, from the date that they sent it, April 2nd, would not come out to grade the road. It was not until Cynthia got involved on the 27th of May that the road got graded, even though they had the letter. They sent it to, Jeff Fries sent me this letter, and yet there was no grading being done.
But it's been done now, is that right?
Well, it needs to be done again.
Okay, so
And
if it's done now, then it's in the link, is that the affair assessment?
Well, through your worship, just to make sure council's aware of what's in the letter. The letter says that it outlines the type of summer maintenance that will be provided. Specifically, it says that grading will be provided on an annual basis, and that the road will be put into a rotation for summer grading to occur a minimum of 2 times per year. So it doesn't mean that we're going to grade it every 2 weeks or once a month or whatever. It's twice a year. A lot of our gravel roads didn't get graded until the middle of May and onwards because it was too wet. And we just didn't have time. So this is an unopened road allowance. So it is not put on the same priority as our open road allowances. But we understand what was provided for correspondence back in 2007, that it would be graded at least twice a year, and we are trying to adhere to maintaining that standard.
When we purchased this home, we lived there full-time for 24 years. The level of service changed from whoever the staff member was of the municipality, but it always has been maintained to a level where we could actually drive into our home. I'm not talking about the winter snow. I'm talking about the summer. Last fall, I could no longer drive, this spring and last fall, I could not drive my car to my own home because Mr. Chapman would not allow the grader to come out to my house because I'd moved, or that's what his indication was.
Okay, Rita, I think we've heard your comments, and I think we've also heard from Mr. Chapman what was in the letter, and I think that we will follow up with this. Rob will, it's in our CAO's hands at this stage, and he will be in contact with you very soon.
I will get
Thank
something
you.
in writing. That's,
Yeah, well, first of all, this is recorded, and it'll be in the minutes, and yes, you will get something in writing.
thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for your coming out today, and I do apologize for your frustration. I know that it's very frustrating. You have a problem. And our last speakers, Jan Chappell and Lindy Iverson. Welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Jan Chappell. I live on the 22nd Side Road off the 11th line. The reason that I'm here today is to talk about the wheeled Volvo excavator that's been purchased in the municipality, the one that's the brush shredder, the great big wheel that comes around and takes branches off of trees and so on. I want to ask if you would consider restricting the use of this machine to non-residential areas. It's a safety hazard. The machine itself says on the machine to stay away 300 meters. Well, our homes are 40 meters from the road. So how do we stay away 300 meters? My neighbor experienced a huge chunk that flew 60 to 70 feet off the machine onto his front lawn. It's a good thing he wasn't standing there. The equipment operator has to stop whenever he sees, and he's alone, whenever he sees a vehicle or a pedestrian coming down the road. We do live on the Tom Thompson Trail. How is he carefully removing limbs off of trees and at the same time keeping watch to make sure that there's no cars or pedestrians walking down the road? It's impossible to do both things at the same time. So what I want to do is request that you consider that it not be done where there are residential homes, and also that when there are going to be branch removals done, that there's some communication done with the residents. We did not know that this machine was coming in. When we talked to the operator today, he was talking about how he could deal with me with my frontage and actually talk about which branch should come off and not, and which was, it's a great idea to be able to do that. And he was very knowledgeable and helpful. If we'd known about this ahead of time, it might have stopped some of the terrible damage that's been done to some of these trees. So, let me just check my notes, make sure I got it all. So it's a safety menace. It produces devastating looking results. And the bucket and chainsaw, which is the other opportunity, the other way of doing things, is a much safer and more appropriate way for limbs to be removed in residential areas. So that's my request, that you consider using this machine, which I know is very expensive, but using it in a more appropriate location rather than right in front of people's homes that are a little closer than 300 meters, which is probably the perfect distance from that kind of machine.
Okay, thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
And I would just like, I'm Lindy Iverson, and I would just like to close with a question/request. I'm wondering if council collectively could look at the possibility that the purchase of this machine was a mistake. That ditch terminator, despite the fact that it's exceptionally efficient and you're always trying to save money, which is wonderful, because of that 300 meters, that is very difficult to honor. It's not being honored on 22 Side Road, and he's working there now. If there was an injury, and you're so concerned about liability, it would be a catastrophic injury. Nothing like somebody going into the closed parks and playing or falling down. It would be one of those catastrophic injuries that Mr. Chapman's always talking about, right? So I do request that the group, that you as a council consider that that machine may have been a mistake, maybe an expensive one, but if somebody did get hurt and lost a limb, you'd be paying for it in another way with insurance premiums creeping up. I know that if you do decide to discuss it, I'll see it in the agenda, so thank you very much for your
Feedback.
time.
Thanks, Lindy, for your comments, appreciate them. Okay, and that is all that we have. Councillor, Mr. Chapman, you want to respond to that?
Through your worship, just to clarify, I have a picture coming, actually, I'll share it with all of council. Have the operator taking a picture on that piece of equipment right now. It says stay back 200 feet, which is 60 meters, which is definitely within the line of sight of our equipment operators. So they're well aware of what's going on in and around the vicinity of a 60-meter radius of that piece of
60-meter
equipment.
radius.
But I will forward that picture on to council.
Thank you.
The house is
Okay.
closer than 60 meters, just to clarify.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on now to council inquiries. Any fun from council? Councillor Greenfield.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. You mentioned a few minutes ago all the activities that would be taking place on Canada Day, a lot of them down at the Meaford Harbour. And with the construction on Sykes Street Bridge, St. Vincent Street and the Trowbridge Street Bridge have been used very busily this year for a variety of reasons, primarily because of the construction of the bridge. I'm just wondering, staff, are you expecting any traffic problems, pedestrian traffic problems down there, especially on Monday? And are you thinking about taking any precautions? Because many more people plus an excess of vehicles could lead to difficulties. Thank you.
Through your worship, I wouldn't say anything more than normal. We're not expecting to take any extra precautions. I mean, the one good thing, because it is a holiday, is that there won't be any work happening on the bridge, so the work area will be fenced off as it is right now, and the sidewalk on the one side of the bridge will still remain open for pedestrians to use. So we're hoping that things will flow as good as they can. I actually am pleasantly surprised with the flow of traffic through that intersection. I think that the only thing that I would suggest for all motorists is to actually keep your head up while you're driving and make sure to abide by the road signs that are there, even temporary ones. I think probably the biggest bone of contention right now is that people try and beat the light at Trowbridge Street and end up halfway through the intersection, which then means that the folks on Trowbridge can't move back and forth. But if everybody actually obeyed the signs that are there, then I think traffic would move even that much smoother.
Thanks. Darcy?
And through you, Madam Mayor, just to add regarding the Canada Day events specifically, we're certainly not expecting any additional traffic problems because of that. I know that all of our residents who are coming and going to those events will take everybody's safety and pedestrian safety into account. Of course, one of the reasons that we're doing things at Meaford Harbour this year instead of on the Sykes Street parking lot is because of the construction downtown, and I think this will mean that it's probably a much better environment this year.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. There has been a lot of emails in the last couple of weeks about the cemetery, and obviously there was a few complaints here. Could we have a little bit of an update on what's happened and what maybe some of the problems were with the grass not getting cut and the maintenance not being done, and are we trying to do something to rectify it?
Through your worship, I mean, I know that there's a notice of motion. Council will discuss it further, and if it passes, then we'll provide a report on different options. Ultimately, I don't want to place blame with anybody, so I'll just say that it's Mother Nature. I mean, it's wet. Like, farmers are a month behind getting crop in the field this year because it's so wet. Our forces are the same, whether they're contract or not, it really doesn't matter. It's extremely unfortunate, the state that the cemetery was in, especially during Father's Day. Not something that anybody wanted, whether staff, contractor, whatever. Ultimately, it rained on the Thursday prior to the Father's Day. It They had 2 crews come in on the Friday and got about half of the cemetery done. They had planned on those same crews coming back on the Saturday, and it rained all day Saturday. And, you know, people, it's not expected that they're going to work on Sunday, nor do we want grass cutters in the cemetery on the Sunday of Father's Day anyways. So they're trying their best. In fact, on the Monday and the Tuesday after, the Tuesday and the Wednesday after that weekend, they had 3 different crews, and we had, you know, there was 2 guys on lawnmowers and 8 people on whippersnippers doing a bunch, not just the cemetery, but a bunch of different properties, trying to actually keep up. So the problem is that it's, if we were doing it ourselves, we'd be in the same situation, because there's just been so much rain this summer, or this spring, or whatever you want to call it, this year, that it's just been really hard for everybody to keep up.
Just to follow up to that, then, so do we have somebody on staff that maybe monitors this? Like, so these are the questions that we get through emails and through the public. So I'm trying to understand how the system all works, because sometimes if you can understand how the system works, then it's a bit easier to accept, you know, the bad weather. And you know, I understand the weather as much as anybody, but you know, we all still have to try and make it work somehow. So is there somebody, you know, in charge of this, you know, monitoring the contractors and the progress or non-progress that they're making?
Through your worship, the foreperson for Parks and Facility Services is the direct contact with the contractor. The contractor has a crew foreman and then also the owner of the business, and our foreman has been in contact with them effectively on a daily basis, I would say, trying to keep getting updates to understand, you know, what areas they're going to be doing, what they're to reprioritize certain areas, to understand the crews that are coming in, and it's because of you know, that consistent messaging that they prioritized us probably over other clients, because that's how we got 3 crews. You know, we're not supposed to have 3 crews coming in here, but it means that they took workers off of, you know, other jobs and other contracts that they have to try and meet our needs, because we were so diligent in trying to explain our needs. So yeah, it's pretty much on a daily basis that our foreperson is in contact with them.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Armstrong, I wonder if I could ask you, is the last time we talked about the library, I think we were expecting that we might see construction starting in July. Is that still likely?
Through your worship, I believe there'll be meetings, this is the library, there'll be meetings of council on July the 15th, a special meeting 15th to deal with the tender. So we hope to award the tender in July, with construction beginning in August or shortly thereafter.
Okay, anything else for inquiries? We'll move on then into the motions and bylaws for decision. And under the consent agenda, we have the CAO 2019-12, the CIP grants and loans that were approved. FIM 2019-34 is the 390 Sykes Street North update, the long-term needs and the property sale. FIM 2019-35 is the Transit Pilot Program update, and that was to approve the discontinuation of the Meaford Transit Pilot Program and provision of the conventional transit system as of June the 30th, with also the direction to staff to provide notice to the County of Grey, indicating that the municipality of Meaford would be willing to partner and provide financial support to the development of a regional intercommunity transit feasibility study. Those are the ones that we have seen before. Are there any of those that council would like to pull this time? Deputy Mayor? 396 Street, okay. And with that, can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put A, B, and C, A and C on the consent agenda. Councillor Bell, Councillor Bartley, all in favor? That is carried. Okay, so then we'll go to B, which is FIM 2019-34, the 390 Sykes Street North update. I'm sure, Deputy Mayor, you'll put that on the table?
I will.
Okay, thank you. And is there a seconder for that? Councillor Vickers? Okay, And did you wish to speak to that first?
Your worship, thank you, I do. I know we spoke about this at the last meeting, but I'm still concerned and not entirely comfortable with the recommendation to move forward with the sale of this property, recognizing that it would be, I guess, a requirement in the purchase of sale for an OPP lease to be continued until the end of 2021, but I'm worried about what might happen after that. There's no necessary requirement for whoever purchases property to continue to lease to our OPP, and I just feel it's so important that our OPP have a presence in Meaford that it seems to me that that's just a bit of a slippery slope or a loophole that could allow the purchaser of this property to not continue with a lease to the OPP if they so chose, and we could therefore then be without that home for the OPP. And I recognize that there could be perhaps other solutions at that point in time, but it just seems to me that the sale of this is so intrinsically linked to the building of our new library. The amount of money, the $700,000, is part of the budget for the new library, and I'm just really worried about the implications for our OPP, recognizing, of course, that we want the library project to move forward, and we recognize the need for funding to support that, but I'm just very concerned that we keep an OPP presence in Meaford, and I worry that letting this property go then opens the door for the OPP at the end of 2021 to decide to leave Meaford. We know that we've got the new Police Services Act coming down at the beginning of next year, and we don't, at least I don't, have a sense of any implications that could arise from that in terms of changes of service or changes to how the OPP might be housed in Meaford. But I wanted to raise that concern because I'm just not comfortable with this at this time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And Mr. Smith, you want to respond to that?
Yes, through your worship. As the report outlines, the intent is that we have the requirement for the lease to go to December 2021, because that fits within a timeline of council being about to consider a policing review, and should council wish to consider other options for policing, and I can't preempt that because council hasn't looked at that yet. That will sort of fit with the timeline for that process. It is our absolute intention that there will be an option to extend in that contract, and that will be a requirement of the sale, and that it will be the municipality's option, not the property owner's option. If the municipality wishes to extend that beyond 2021, there will be that language as part of the contract. With regard to OPP presence, the ownership of the building really has no impact on whether, if the OPP decides that they don't wish to be in that building, well, really, there's not an awful lot we could do about that one way or the other. However, we see no expectation from the OPP that they do not wish to be in that facility. In fact, they've been very clear over the last couple of years, our detachment, that they do wish to be. And I think it would be... it wouldn't be in the best interest of the municipality to hold a sale like this up on the concern that something may happen in the future. I think we would deal with that as and when that occurs.
Okay. Anything further? Any other comments? No? All right. Are we ready to call the question on this going forward? All those in favor of the recommendation as presented, and those against? And that is carried. Okay, moving into items for consideration. Bylaw 2019-56 is the sale of the land parts 2 and 5 of 16R, 1111, oh my gosh, I can't read that, 11153 Sykes Street North. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put this on the table? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Greenfield. Okay, Rob.
Thank you,
I was
Worship.
looking for you or Chris, I guess it's you.
This is me. So this is a matter, council did provide staff with direction in 2017 to proceed under these conditions with the sale of the land adjacent to the sewage pumping station on Sykes Street. It's taken some time to finalize the survey to get it done and deposited. There also was some health issues with the owner that we could finalize it, but we are now in a position to finalize it. and request council pass the bylaw to sell the land. Basically, we're selling 3 feet of land adjacent to it, but we're maintaining a working easement should we ever need to get in there and do work on the sewage pumping station lands and get our equipment on it. Very unlikely, but we are maintaining that to protect our interest in the long term, so.
Okay, thank you for that, Rob. Any questions for Rob? Councillor Vickers.
Through your worship, so we wouldn't own any of the ground then on top, going down to the water? Like this is, I'm assuming this is where the pipe is going out into the bay, is it not, or no?
No, we actually don't. This is just a pump station where the sewage comes in off of Sykes, goes to the pump station beside Pete's Creek, and then just pumps it back out along. There's no infrastructure going out to the water at this location. It's basically just a grassed area to the water down to rocks. And we're just selling 3 feet of that land adjacent to this residential use so that he can put an addition onto his building. So it's land that we don't need.
So how much land is there then?
If you, I don't know if I attached. Yeah, we're still maintaining a fair bit of land. Yeah, I guess, I'm just trying to see if the survey was attached. Just the picture, yeah, didn't attach the survey. There's still a lot of the land that we have for a sewage pumping station, probably about a third of an acre of land where the pump station sits. And the pump station's right out by the road, so it's really not a lot of land that we need.
Anything further from council? I'll call the question, and all in favor of this is presented, and that is carried. Bylaw 2019-57 is to remove an H4 holding of Part Lot 10, Concession 10. I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Councillor Bartley. Councillor Kentner, thank you. And back to you, Rob.
Yes. This is just a standard holding removal where they were required to address a condition of the Conservation Authority before the holding symbol would be removed. They have addressed that, so the holding symbol can be removed by council.
So we can remove it. Okay, thank you. Comments or questions for Rob? I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Next one is Bylaw 2019-58 and FIM 2019-37. It's an energy reporting, conservation, and demand management plan. I have a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Bell, Councillor Bartley. Okay.
Through your worship, just to confirm, sorry, can you? Just wanted to confirm the reason why this was coming directly to council is because we have a requirement to have a energy conservation and demand management plan actually adopted by council by July 1st. So we've been working feverishly on this. I'd like to thank Brady Carbert and also our asset management summer student, Marshall Lozon, for putting a bunch of time and effort into this over the last couple months to try and get this all put together. I'm not going to get into it a whole lot. It's fairly self-explanatory. It's very high level. We used similar examples of what's been proposed. Everybody's kind of trying to rush to do this all at the same time, so we've talked to a lot of counterparts in other lower tiers and also, Grey County themselves. Ultimately, the nuts and bolts of this will be worked out more and more as we continue to refine this and update the information on an annual basis. And in large part, we're trying to understand what the impacts of changes from the provincial government are going to be with regards to incentives and whatnot as to what we're going to do in the future to actually save energy consumption, because kind of the business case for a lot of these projects maybe aren't as strong as they once were in the past because the incentives aren't there anymore.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Vickers.
So through your worship, so the question is, so are we willing to spend $2 to save $1? Is that what we're kind of getting to? Like, and when you say there isn't the tax benefits or the tax, not benefits, grants, there's still always that one taxpayer dollar, right? So like, are we going to spend so much on a light bulb? Like again, spend $2 to save $1. So that's my concern.
Through your worship, I guess what I'd say to that is, there's only ever one taxpayer. But if you have an opportunity to grab that money, you'd be silly not to, because if not, somebody else is going to. So if the provincial government had $10 million set aside to incentivize cheap light bulbs, they're going to keep providing that incentive program until the $10 million runs out. So we might as well have captured some of that before somebody else, because they'd already allocated that money. So, things like light bulbs are still, whether there's an incentive or not, a lot of the times there's 3 to 5 year paybacks and something like that, and they have a 10-year operating life. So it's a no-brainer. The stuff that we're starting to get into now is, it's not the low-hanging fruit. We've dealt with most of that in our facilities. It's now the bigger stuff, where there still is a payback on it, but instead of being able to invest $10 in a light bulb, now we're talking about having to invest $30,000 in a variable drive pump, right? So that variable drive pump still provides energy benefits, and the payback is maybe 10 years, but it's still coming out with that $30,000 immediately, right? So that's why we're having to now start to really dig into these and do a better job of justifying the business case for them. The report does detail what's called the people and process initiatives, which is where we really think that we can strive to make some changes and potentially save. At least other places have said that the savings can be up to 5% of the overall energy use. So we're going to, and there'll be knock-on benefits to this too, because we're going to try and educate our staff, and hopefully they take some of this education back and even use it in their own personal lives and help save money on their houses, which, still reduces the overall greenhouse effect, but making sure that things like, monitors and computers aren't left on, and using power bars that have timers on them so everything just completely shuts off for the whole weekend when somebody's not in the office. Things like that, where, it's all that phantom power that they talk about, right, that you can actually save on. And that's where we're going to really start to focus over the next couple of years.
I'm just concerned that we're going to get to the point where it'll be just to make the numbers, to save the energy, we'll spend more than it's ever worth, sort of thing, eh? And, maybe that's just the way I am. Sometimes your cheapest dollar is the dollar you don't have to spend.
Through your worship, in the past, I would absolutely concur with you, because I'm the bean counter, so it's all about counting the beans, and, if you're going to plant a bean, you got to make sure the two grow, right? But ultimately, there's also the benefit, somebody like Lindy, who's in the back here, is going to love me for saying this. What's the cost on the environmental side of things? So, it's hard to, monetize the environmental impacts of things right now, but there could be huge monetary impacts 10, 15, 20, 3 generations from now even, right? So spending that $2 to only save $1 might also benefit, the environmental side of things that you really can't put a price on. So where it makes smart decisions, either by significantly reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, therefore reducing our footprint, or even if it's close to break even, those will be the projects that we'll have to start to banter about around the council table with moving forward.
Okay, thanks for that, Darcy. Anything else? I'll call the question. All in favor of this moving forward? And that is carried. Okay. Bylaw 2019-59 is enabling accessibility funding agreement. Can I have a mover and a seconder to put that on the table? Councillor Bartley and Councillor Greenfield. Okay, back to you, Darcy.
Through your worship, this is one of these typical funding agreements that are required in order for the mayor and the clerk to enter into the funding agreement. I am required by the agreement to have to dance around the expectations of the funding, because this is a federal grant which we have to sign the agreement first and maintain silence for 60 days before we can make anything official. However, if you read the actual bylaw, you may figure out what the money is for, and that's as much as I can say.
It's a big secretive. we want the money, but we can't see what it's for. But it's accessibility.
Through your worship, we kind of twisted the federal government up on this one because the understanding was that we were not allowed to make this public. However, I provided documentation that said that we couldn't sign the agreement without having this bylaw actually go through council. So they had to kind of bend a little bit, but like I said, this is as much as I can say.
I guess it's pointless in asking if there's any questions. Okay, are there any comments? Then I'll call the question, all in favor. And that is carried. Thank you, Darcy, for that secretive explanation. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to go into committee of the whole? Councillor Bartley, Councillor Bell. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, first one off the mark is a Development and Environmental Services, DES 2019-07, an addendum for the Kingston Beach land request. May I have a mover and a seconder to put that on the table, please? Councillor Greenfield, Councillor Bell. Okay, Rob.
Thank you, Worship. This is the one that was spoke to earlier. There's a number of matters that we're dealing with regard to this file. As a result of that roundtable discussion that we did hold in Owen Sound with the Kingston Beach, it was great to hear the discussion with regard to concerns about the unopened road allowance. So we want to put this report to put the acquisition of municipal land to bed. We have discussed it with the applicant, and he's not concerned of it. As we've indicated to that group, it wasn't actually his initial request to acquire the road allowance. It was actually the suggestion that from our solicitor, should he want a water line down there, that it's best to he own it and we keep an easement for drainage. But we're moving away from that and are in a position now to recommend that we do not sell the unopened road allowance. We'll continue to be reviewing a number of the other matters with the residents down there on the go forward, including looking at that existing drainage ditch together with a lot of our other unopened road allowances on the go forward. So that's where we'll be considering those matters in the future.
Okay, that was well laid out there. Any comments, questions from Council? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to thank staff for coming up with the same answer as I did for a change. I really appreciate that, and I agree with the recommendation, and I only hope that we as a municipality look at the work that has been done down there already and the work that will likely happen down there, that it's on the up and up and it's legal. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Anything further, Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Through your Worship, to Rob, I'm just wondering where this leaves Mr. Edgar. Now, could he still apply for and get two severances on the properties? Is that off the books, or is that still possible?
Those applications, Your Worship, those applications are still being reviewed. His biggest issue, there's issues that he has with regard to stormwater and that which we'll continue to review and can be monitored and addressed. But his big issue is water, getting water. He needs some sort of source. But we do also have a number of others who are utilizing water and needing water, so we want to review that comprehensively in relation to the entire plan. So we'll be doing it in relation to that. So it is still active, but it's something we need to deal with before we consider recommending to the committee any approval.
Nothing more?
May, Your Worship, this is going in a little different direction, but the little parkette at the end of Kingston Beach Road, on the waterfront that the municipality actually owns. I think at one time in one of the reports it was mentioned that perhaps that piece of property could be sold to the cottages down there. Has there been anything further on that, or was I seeing something that wasn't there?
It's part of our ongoing discussion with regard to options. We have a a piece of land that's owned by Mr. Edgar that provides road access to these residents. So we actually don't own the road leading to Kingston Beach. The municipality owns the road, but we don't maintain it. There's an informal residents group, they're not a formalized association, that sort of looks after the road. We wouldn't be able to transfer anything to an informal group. It would have to be a more formalized group. And so we're, again, to back up, we'll be having discussions with them with regard to those matters, as well as existing water lines that run to the water with agreement, and those that run to the water without any formal agreement across the municipal land. So we're trying to work with them on creating a good path forward that works for all.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, I'll call a question. All in favor? And that is carried. DES 2019-36 is a proposed land dedication of part lot 22, concession 9. Have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Kentner. Okay, back to Rob.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Sorry, I had shaded an area and marked up a map of the area that's proposed to be dedicated. If I could ask Hannah if she can just go to the map in the report, the appendices. This is a plan of subdivision that was draft approved in 1995 and is still draft approved. Back then they didn't expire. The owner has been looking at whether he proceeds with it, whether he modifies it and makes the lots bigger. Does he just proceed with the east half and not the west half? And so he's looking at his options. But in the meantime, he has offered up the sale of the ravine that runs through the middle of the property. The primary purpose of the municipality, twofold in acquiring it. One is that our fish plan policy speaks to acquisition of environmentally protected lands through development approvals. In addition, as the Tom Thompson Trail moves along the unopened 22nd Side Road, it deviates into this property to be able to traverse that ravine. And so we would be acquiring lands that would be owned, that are currently being used by the Tom Thompson Trail Group. So in this position, because it's at no cost to the municipality, adjacent to the unopened 22nd Side Road, we're recommending that it be deeded to the or we're willing to accept it, let's put it that way.
Okay, comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor of accepting this as reported, and that is carried. Okay, Financial Services and Infrastructure Management, FIM 2019-38 is the non-winter road maintenance. I have a mover and a seconder. Please to put that on the table. Councillor Bell, Councillor Bartley. And over to you, Mr. Chapman.
Yes, Your Worship. This is a report that's been promised for a little while now, coming out of a council meeting from a couple months ago with regards to requiring us to do some work on analysis of our winter roads, or our summer road standards. I think the first thing I should note is that a lot of this report is simply a regurgitation of the service delivery review report that was done. That being said, the numbers have all been updated. We've also added in a bunch of things because stuff has changed in how we operate from 3 years ago. One thing, though, remains the same as it did in the service delivery review report. The SDR showed that at the time, based on the service standards that were deemed necessary, we were probably 5 staff short of meeting all the demands. At the time, council provided approval to take 3 seasonal staff and turn those seasonal operators into permanent full-time staff. We, based on the numbers now, are still at least those 2 people short, if not more still yet. So the expectation of actually trying to get everything accomplished is probably not realistic. The numbers show that, there's 15,600 available hours. Based on all the charts, we've allocated more than 13,000 hours out to all these duties. That doesn't include all the things that are done for other departments, interdepartmental stuff, banner hanging, special events, so on and so forth. It doesn't include any of the overtime, vacation time, so on and so forth. So we're still behind the gun. But the intent of the report is not to complain about that. It's simply to highlight what it is that we do. I think the other thing that's not in the report that's really important to talk about is that 5 years ago, the Transportation Services Department operated completely differently than it does now. Back in 2014 and before that, there were 2 patrol yards, which there still are, Patrol A, Patrol B, but in the past, they operated independently of each other throughout the entire year. So where there was 5 or 6 guys in the summertime reporting to each yard, if half of them were gone from one yard, they didn't all join forces to try and still get a crew made up. They just had less guys to work with. So the other thing that happened was that we had a different methodology, service standard, deployment for the winter. So the amount of overtime that was racked up was significant. So in the summertime, the guys would take all the summer, their summer vacation, because they wouldn't take any vacation in the winter. Plus they'd have all this overtime that they had to use up. So quite often, on average, less than half of our full-time staff were actually working any given week during the non-winter control season. So it was really hard to do anything. So what happened from a service standard was simply roads got graded and cold patching was completed. And that's it. Other than the gravel placement program, nothing else happened. We didn't do ditching, we didn't do tree removals, we didn't do our own culvert replacements, none of that stuff. So the consultant came in 2014, DFA did a great big review, provided a report to council on all of the issues that, potential problems, things that weren't being done that were best practices, so on and so forth. When I took over the Transportation Fleet Services Department, that report was my guiding document. So using that report and then using all the, the actual knowledge and input from the staff, the equipment operators, we made a bunch of changes, either through their suggestions or through the report suggestion. And this is where we're at today right now, and what we do and how we do things substantially differently than what we did, nearly a handful of years ago. So I'm not going to get into the detail of the report. If council has any questions, I'm here to take any of those.
Thanks very much, Darcy. First off, and as you've noted, it was a kind of a regurgitation of the SDR that was very, very thorough. I recall that very well in 2016, and with updated information and learning from experiences as we moved along. So thank you for that. I thought it was a very comprehensive report, and certainly noted the changes that have been made in service delivery. With that, I'll open it up for questions. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I want to thank my fellow councillors for, I believe it was a unanimous support on my notice of motion to have staff look into this. I'll back your comments up 100%, Madam Mayor. The report that we've received, I was actually taken aback at how nicely it was put together, the information that it contained, and I have made contact earlier this morning with Hannah. And just before our meeting this afternoon, I had an opportunity to talk with Mr. Chapman. And as you have read through the reports, you've seen a lot of charts that showed things like shoulder drop-off and the timing of when that can be done, and double surface treatment, how often and how frequently that they're filled in. Those are things that I know I don't have and previous sitting council never had. And I've asked Hannah and Darcy that in the future, when staff have an opportunity to print that off, I know and I think all of us would appreciate having a copy of that, and whenever staff have some time, just to print that for us would be great. I want to say that on page 14 of 15 of the report, I think it's the biggest punchline that's in the report, and just bear with me, fellow councillors, I know you're all capable of reading. but it says not allocating the resources to complete the minimum maintenance standards. Related activities could have the municipality vulnerable to liability claims for not maintaining the transportation network effectively and in compliance with the provincial legislation. And maybe more importantly, not maintaining the transportation network to an acceptable level will cause concern from taxpayers who do not see value for the tax dollars in having well-maintained roads to travel on. And that couple of lines, Madam Mayor and fellow councillors, I think that all of us that have received complaints and emails and conversations with ratepayers, I think that the acknowledgement inside this report that senior staff and members of staff are more than well aware of this. And I really appreciate those lines being added into that report. That tells me that you're more than well aware of that and that you are sensitive to the comments that we as council get. And I can't tell you how pleased I am when I read this report. It was very well put together, and I know that as a single speaking councillor at this moment, I have a better understanding even now than when that first service delivery review was presented. So I want to compliment you and your staff for pulling this together. I think it was top-notch.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Well said. Comments? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and yes, well said, Councillor Bell. Thank you for that. I'm just curious to know, recognizing that Darcy has suggested we are still a couple of men short from where we'd like to be to really complete the level of service that we'd like to provide in Meaford. Are there any other opportunities for contracting out any pieces of this service? I'm wondering about dust suppressant application, for example, or the invasive road species maintenance. Is there any opportunity to look at anything like that within this report to contract that could help us with considering the number of bodies that we do have and all the work that's to be done?
Certainly, Your Worship. So the gravel placement and the dust suppressant, I mean, the dust suppressant itself is already contracted out. Like, we don't do it. It's a truck that comes in afterwards. But doing all those gravel roads and everything, we did an analysis of that back with the 2016 SDR. And it was determined that, you know, using in-house, and this is 2016 numbers, of course, but using in-house forces would cost about $40,000 to do all of the application, rolling, grading, and everything else. And the prices that we received, because we actually did tender as an option that contractors just do it, it was about 140 grand. So it actually would cost us $100,000 more to have a contractor do that work for us. The invasive weeds, where they can be sprayed, we actually piggyback onto Grey County's tender, but there are a number of areas where they can't be sprayed because it's wet, and therefore if there's water, then the chemicals that they use through the spray, you can't actually use it. So that's why we just use our own tractor with the bush hog attachment to it, or the flail mower, and knock it down so that, you know, we get rid of it. I don't think we'd be able to, I mean, we have a contractor to do roadside grass cutting. I don't think we would find somebody just specifically for invasive weeds because it's very sporadic as to the time of year and the areas. So it'd be really kind of hard to nail that down, you know, as far as, you know, when we could and how we could contract that out. I mean, the 2016 SDR really talked about specific areas for contracting out, you know, being you know, whether we could do something with the centrifugal sewer cleaner. So we already got rid of the Vector truck because we recognized that we did that report. The other one was the street sweeper. Council just defeated a motion to actually go out and do that. So I'm really not too sure where, you know, we could, you know, save on that. Certainly, you know, maybe this is something we should consider because it's not, from a public relations, it's not us, it's a contractor. But all of the brushing, I mean, like Hydro One brings in the exact same type of machinery that we've purchased, that Volvo that was talked about earlier, to do all of their hydro lines. Now, they do it because They have numerous contracts all over the province to kind of do it. So we could contract out all of the brushing. It's still the same type of machinery. It's still the same type of work that's done. But we need that piece of machinery anyways for ditching and for all the winter stuff that we do as far as, freezing and thawing and everything else. So we wouldn't actually save any money by getting rid of that piece of equipment. So I don't think that there's value in that. I truly believe that we are the best, like the municipal staff and the equipment that we have are best equipped to do the work at the least price available at this stage of the game.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in addition to what Councillor Bell has said, I well remember the years when we had the staff, all very fine workers, who were able to accumulate a couple of weeks of additional holiday time due to overtime in the winter months, and then in the summer, some of them who had been with us for a long time would have 4 or 5 weeks, holidays coming to them, and we had road projects, some of them not really major projects, but simple things like graveling or just potholing, and the story was, well, we can't really start that stretch because employee A's, he'll be here this week, but then he's off for 2 weeks. Well, then he's got another week from winter, and it just went on, and things got backed up, and some of our roads likely deteriorated further and worse than what they should have and what they could have. I just want to mention I had the pleasure of being up on Manitoulin Island last week, and some of their provincial highways are in very bad shape. Like some of them are comparable to our St. Vincent 11th line and some of the concession roads out in Sydenham. So we're not doing too bad a job overall, and it is improving every year. Thank you.
Thanks, Harley. We have learned since then. So Darcy, I guess the question would be the standards and the level that is recommended here and that we all value and believe in. How does this compare? Will you be bringing us a request for 2 more staffers at the 2020 budget?
Through your worship, this report was provided for information purposes only. It's certainly not something that, there are a bunch of things that we can do differently, or services that can be changed. It's simply a matter of whether council wants to reduce certain things or increase certain things. That's always the push and pull. One thing that's not mentioned in the report but is a reality is people's expectations or desire for change in a bunch of our gravel roads, right? And they think that we're not maintaining the gravel roads well enough. Ultimately, we're lucky enough that we still have staff with us that have been around for 20 or 30 years. And they say the amount of gravel that we're putting on roads right now is the same amount of gravel that they were putting on roads back when Sydenham was Sydenham and St. Vincent was St. Vincent. So the difference is it's the type of vehicles and equipment traveling down the road. So if you can picture salt is the easiest way to explain this. If you take a bunch of salt in your hand, take the salt that you throw it on your driveway in the wintertime, and put it in your hands and just start going back and forth, right? Eventually, that nice chunky salt turns to nothing more than table salt, right? That's what's happening to our gravel roads. We're still using 7/8 gravel, 3/4 gravel. It's the same gravel we've always been using. The issue is that the farm equipment in particular is a lot larger and a lot heavier than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. So that equipment goes down the road and it takes that gravel and goes like this and rubs it back and forth together. And the way to resolve the gravel road problem is probably to increase the gravel budget by 50%. And instead of a 3-year rotation of gravel, having to go to a 2-year rotation of gravel. Because that's the problem with the gravel roads, is that by the time the third year rolls around, that back and forth of those stones has disintegrated to nothing more than stone dust, and that's why the roads are in the shape that they're in. And, you know, we grade them as best we can, and we reshape them, you know, 4, 5, 6 times a year, but if there's no aggregate left, then there's only so much you can do.
Okay, thank you. We'll wait to see what 2020 brings. Any further questions for staff? Comments? I'll call the question. All in favor of receiving this for information? And that is carried. Okay, moving on to updates from members appointed to county council or committees, local boards. Deputy Mayor, can we start with you?
I'd be delighted. Thank you, Your Worship, very much. And I'll speak to the last county council meeting, which was June the 13th at the call of the warden. The County of Grey, I'll begin by saying, is supportive of correspondence to the Roma Board to suggest a joint conference with OGRA and Roma, going back to the way that it used to be. To this past year, for example, we had Roma in January and OGRA in February, which meant 2 snowy drives to the city. And I think it would be great if they would consider joining forces again. That does not seem to be moving forward positively, but I will update you if anything changes. The other point that I thought I'd like to share with our council is the fact that the province is making a change in employment services and in the health units. So both of those structures will be moving to a 4-county situation rather than the way they are within each county now. So the alignment will be Grey Bruce, Huron, and Perth, which is the same as our 4-county labor market board. So we're waiting for more information to see how all of those realignments are going to shape up. But the County of Grey is preparing a proposal to be hopefully the service system manager for employment services. They feel that they are well positioned to take that on. So if that should come to pass, I'll also update this council. So that, I think, is where the highlights for me, Your Worship.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Anyone from boards or committees that wish to bring us up to date with things? Councillor Keaveney, Deputy Mayor, sorry, in your role of council.
Thanks, Your Worship. This week there was a meeting of the Blue Mountains Task Force, and I thought I'd like to bring forward the discussion on the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. We recognize that the province is going to require all of us to have such a plan by January 1st, 2021. And we know the county is in process of creating a framework that will come to the lower tiers. We'll have that report before county on the 11th of July. And the community safety and well-being plans, really the purpose of those is to look at how in each community we can tackle crime, try and reduce crime, and to try to break the cycle of, within families, of kids in particular who kind of grow up in an environment where that is potentially their future. So I really have a lot of hope and faith for these plans that they really can help to get people away from these sorts of situations and back into the workforce and leading productive lives. So looking forward to further updates on that.
Thanks very much, Matt.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to add to that, because I'm very glad to know that County Council is going to receive a report about that, because that's actually really the first time we've heard that this is going forward. The Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan is a lower tier mandated project. While some municipalities have encouraged the county to do so, my understanding from colleagues around the county is that there is a severe lack of agreement that this should or should not be a county matter. This is something that this council will have to deal with and either have to ask the county, delegate your authority to the county to do it, or do it ourselves. And really, until we as staff receive a bit more correspondence from the county, we're not in a position to be able to give you good advice on how this should go forward.
I think part of the discussion around the table, just informally, has been that each municipality is very different. Creating a single community safety and well-being plan is, could be quite problematic. It would just be a framework of things to be considered, but that at each municipal level then would craft it to suit our own needs and situation. Thanks for that, Matt. Anything further? And seeing none, we'll move on to Councillor Greenfield's favorite topic, the building report.
Would that be the building report? Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we do have the building report with us. It's in good shape. The numbers are down a little bit from last year. We have 14 permits let for new homes, which is quite commendable. Multi-residential is where we have seen the biggest decline thus far this year. We've only had, I think, permits for 6 units in multi-residential, which is unfortunate, particularly because multi-residential is usually a little more attainable, affordable housing, which we desperately need. So we're hoping that will pick up. Mind you, it has been very strong the last year or two. Agricultural buildings are up a bit, and that's always a good sign. So all in all, well over $11 million of permits, and I said it before, but I know the weather has been an effect this year, a negative effect on building, and hopefully this next 6 months will show a marked increase, even though, as I say, we are doing very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're down to moving out of Committee of the Whole. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Kentner and Deputy Mayor. All in favor? This is carried. Okay, are there any notices of motion to come forward from Council? Seeing none, we'll move into motions for decision. And the first one is Councillor Kentner, Commercial and Industrial Vacant Property Rebate. I'm assuming, Councillor Kentner, you'd like to put that on the table? And is there a seconder for that motion? And Councillor Greenfield. Okay.
In a nutshell, I think staff told us that really there's only $5,000 or $6,000 a year in total tax levy money that isn't, coming in. But over the course of our term, we're maybe looking at $25,000 or $30,000, which can make the difference in some of the major infrastructure projects. We're trying to move as many through these next 4 years as we can. The other thing is that when these buildings remain vacant year after year, it sort of telegraphs a message. And in fact, what is happening is people are basically sitting on these properties, not developing them, but essentially waiting, for their payday. And it doesn't matter to them if it's 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, eventually they'll get it. So my feeling is that, and this isn't something we can do on our own, but we can appeal to the minister for some assistance, and I think that Owen Sound is doing this right now, and I think it's because they've got a reputation as a city that is shrinking, and I think we don't want to be, riding their coattails. We want to be taking our own initiative here, so that's why I brought this motion forward.
Thank you, Ross. Is there anything further from Council? Comments? Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I totally agree with this with this motion. If perhaps the dollars and cents maybe aren't huge, but on the other hand, every dollar we can bring in to our municipality, that is revenue that doesn't have to be raised from other tax dollars. I'm hoping at least send a message to the owners of some of these properties that this municipality is interested in the advancement, in the progress of our municipality, and having a number of buildings sitting vacant, and again, this goes back to attainable housing, perhaps chances there, affordable housing, that some of these buildings could be converted into, or indeed replaced by lower cost housing We need that, and we want that, and if there's some way we can generate a little bit of momentum, let's try it.
It's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chapman, but this rebate program must be applied for on an annual basis, my understanding, for vacant properties, and whether they do or they don't, it's up to the individual property owner for them to make application on a regular basis for this. And if they don't make that application, then they are not, there's no rebate coming forward for those vacant properties. But I guess I'm wondering what else could be done to encourage, because I take your point. Nobody likes to see a derelict building. We've gone through that, and we see it frequently, and it spoils the image of our beautiful place. We don't want to see that happen. But is there some other way that we can have some influence on private property owners to get renters, or to get their buildings back into a state that is not just even cleaned up in terms of other than our property standards? I know that that's a lengthy process as well. I don't know what else can be done. Councillor Kentner.
Through your worship, I just this afternoon filled out a complaint form for the bylaw officer on the building opposite the Billy Bishop Airport, simply because, you know, if we have to be proactive on these issues, I think we need to be. And I mean, I go to Hone Sound 100 times a month, I think, and every time I pass it, I think somebody is really casting aspersions on our municipality by letting this building fall down in front of us, you know, on Highway 26. So that's one example anyway, but...
Anything further, staff? Any comments on that at this stage? Okay, so I will call the question. All in favor then of this report going forward, this recommendation, and that is carried. Okay, and moving on to the next one, again, Councillor Kentner with a review of the cemetery services.
Thank you, Your Worship. And if I may, just in speaking to the motion...
If you'll wait until I have a seconder, please.
You're right.
Councillor Bell, thank you. Okay, fire away.
In speaking to the motion, I appreciate the job that our municipal staff do working on our cemeteries. I truly do. My family just had a committal service at Lakeview Cemetery on Saturday, and everyone we dealt with was professional and helpful and extremely kind. And likewise, I want you to know that I do appreciate our senior staff are always working to get ratepayers the best value for money possible in maintaining all of our public spaces. I understand that and appreciate it. So this motion, and I know I have sounded very critical in the past, but this motion is not intended as any form of criticism at all. I recognize that Lakeview Cemetery was maintained at a very high standard in the past, and that in today's economy, we can't have a large dedicated staff tending to it. And I also recognize that as the decades roll by, there are more and more monuments, that there are more people in Lakeview Cemetery than there are in our municipality, I understand. And there are more and more monuments that no one locally, or maybe even anyone at all, is able to maintain them. So I would like staff to consider that in large sections of the cemetery, stone crop moss has replaced grass as the ground cover. And I truly believe that if we want grass in the cemetery, then we have to do something more than just cut grass. We have to nurture it too, and we all know what the various elements of that are. And I'd also like to point out that the high public interest in Lakeview is perhaps an opportunity for us to go back to the old idea of a public board that could lead to higher maintenance standards at a moderate cost. So the purpose of my motion is just to enable council to raise the bar if we so choose. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Kentner, for bringing this forward. I find it oftentimes that when persons of our municipality come before council, and they, they're pretty pointed in their comments to what they have, and unfortunately, some of the people who really need to see that this council listens, and in your case, you brought forward a notice of motion, and now here we are looking to, as your motion says, to direct staff to do something on this behalf. and unfortunately, they're not there. But I think it is most definitely worthy of having staff bring back a report on your notice of motion.
Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Kentner, for bringing this forward. I do believe the cemetery should look its best. I hope this doesn't force us into bringing the lawn maintenance back in-house, like it was explained earlier today. With the weather that it has, whether it was in-house or out-of-house, we may not have been able to get on hold of it. I was wondering if, in this report, is there a chance of having a Friends of the Cemetery maybe take part of the responsibility up there? Is that a possibility?
Through your worship, I would hope that there are thousands of friends of the cemetery. If there's ever a place that, you know, people are going to care about their own loved ones and look after their own little plot up there, this would be the location already. You know, to the comment of the Parks Board, you know, Parks Boards or Parks and Rec Boards, those boards are just people who then you as council are going to delegate your authority to make decisions on the level of service. They're not actually going to provide that level of service themselves. So in reality, I think Councillor Kentner hit it on the head. In the past, there was a substantially different level of service. In fact, I've been told that prior to amalgamation, the town of Meaford used to employ 3 full-time individuals plus 1 summer student at the cemetery. Just the cemetery. So we certainly have a different level of service now than we do then. And in reality, if we want a better standard, we will be paying staff to do that.
And that's what this report would be, what I would highlight. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks as well to you, Councillor Kentner, for bringing this forward, and I certainly support asking for a report on the cemetery. My hope, I guess, is 2 things. One, I recognize it'll take some time for staff to prepare a report and to bring that back, and there will probably be budget implications to that, but I'm just hopeful that to some degree we can create some level of improvement this year. I don't know whether it could be possibly fertilized or some seed thrown on the bare spots, but if we could do something this year to show folks that we hear them and that we take this seriously and we want to see some improvement. And my other hope in the report is that staff might be able to address the fountain. The entrance to the cemetery is looking a little sad these days, and I know that was discussed by the prior council when Mr. Butno was here and the question was asked, and I believe he said it was $6,000 at that point in time to repair that fountain, so it's probably more than that now. But I just wondered within the report if there could be some attention given to the entrance and the fountain and the pond, and there's a post there that doesn't have a sign on it that I think used to, and just to get a sense for this council of what the expenditure might need to be to spruce up that entrance.
Through Your Worship, we'll certainly look at it. It's my understanding, and I hope I'm right in this, that information had been provided to council prior with regards to that fountain, that the fountain was not going to be fixed, and that something else was going to be done at the entrance point with regards to updating the whole garden and everything else at some point to actually make it better, but that a fountain was not, like there would not be an operable fountain there in the future. But certainly this will get confirmed through that report. With regards to your other comment about, doing something with grass, in speaking with Mark, who has, of course, the most experience there of anybody, the reason that the grass is no longer grass is because we no longer spray. Because things changed a few years ago with regards to spraying, and unless you're a farmer and maybe have been given some other forms of leniency. As a municipality, we can't use the same types of, chemicals that we used to use, and that's why it really is an invasive species is what it is. It's taken over. Realistically, what we would need to do is develop a full-on turf management plan where you're going to go in, till everything up, because there's a lot of ups and downs through, like from plot to plot to plot. Everything needs to be gone through, smooth it out, roll it, seed it, then continue to overseed it, fertilize it on an annual basis, so on and so forth. And again, this can all be done. It is reasonable to do all of that there. It's simply a matter of more staff and more money to do it. That's really all it takes.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will certainly be supporting this motion. It's interesting that this motion is directed, I almost entirely at Lakeview Cemetery. Lakeview is the one we hear about most often. Our municipality does own 2 other municipal cemeteries. We don't?
Through your worship, we control 17 cemeteries.
I'm sorry?
We control 17 cemeteries. There are 2 active cemeteries.
2 active.
But there are also 15 closed cemeteries, which we also have to maintain to, a standard as well, because the municipality owns them, and there's the Cemetery Act, and we have to maintain all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman, but we do, I was thinking of the 2 active ones, one north of Bodner, one south of Bodner. And now we did have some concerns in St. Matthews a few years ago. We almost had a fallen angel in St. Matthews, but that was repaired. But I'm just wondering, are we missing something that's being done in these 2 particular smaller cemeteries that aren't being done at Lakeview? Is it a matter of I'm going to use the word pride in the maintenance? Could we perhaps learn some tips from what's being done in our rural cemeteries that maybe we could indoctrinate into Lakeview and improve the situation there?
Mr. Chapman.
Through your worship, so it's the same staff that look after all of the cemeteries, and it's actually the same contractor, with the exception of a couple of them that are over in the Leith and Annan area that are dealt with by an Owen Sound contractor. All of the other spaces, it's the same staff, and it's the same lawn care contractor that looks after it all. So it really, from Lakeview's perspective, I think it's about the foot traffic that goes through there, because it's an active cemetery, not a closed one. And more importantly, it's about that weed that is growing in there that has really taken a foothold over the last 4 or 5 years since we haven't been able to spray.
Okay, Councillor Kentner.
Just for the record, there are 2 inoperable fountains at Lakeview, but there's also a spectacular fountain in the pond, and it is looking good.
Councillor Vickers.
Through your worship, so people pay money to get buried in these cemeteries, and some of that money goes to the perpetual fund. So how does that all work with not only Lakeview, but maybe these other cemeteries that we have? Because it can't just be a paid tax dollar expense, because there's money that has been paid and has been set aside that should be put into a perpetual fund.
Through your worship, Councillor Vickers is absolutely correct. When you purchase a plot and then have an interment at Lakeview, a portion of it is the actual cost for that service immediately then, and a portion of it goes to the Perpetual Care Fund. There's legislation that governs the Perpetual Care Fund. In reality, the municipality will continue to accumulate funds in the specific Perpetual Care bank accounts, which can't be used to offset operating costs. The interest, though, any accumulation of investment income on an annual basis can be used to offset that. So for last year, the total investment income was about $13,000 in the Perpetual Care Fund. The total cost for the cemeteries, is in excess of, I believe, about $100,000. And then we have annual revenues from all the interments that actually happen that help reduce that. But the net impact to the taxpayer typically runs, depending on the year and the number of services that happen, anywhere between $50,000 and $70,000. So the burden on the taxpayer typically is between $50,000 and $70,000 a year, depending on how many burials we have, how many people purchase plots, so on and so forth.
So remind me, what is the lawn care contract? What is that worth then?
Through your worship, I believe it's around $25,000 a year for Lakeview Cemetery.
So can you give me an example of the other dollars that are spent on the cemetery? Because obviously I would think that would be the biggest expense.
Through your worship, sure. So there's facility maintenance, there's utility costs, there's staff wages, like for the actual services, so on and so forth. So I mean, that's the lion's share of it. We do actually have staff there year round, right? So the facility is open through the winter. The roads are plowed in the winter. So there's a significant cost. It's the manpower cost for that facility year round.
So if I can ask, so there's full-time staff there. So then in the summertime, what do the staff do? Like, I guess I'm struggling to understand where the costs all come from.
Certainly. So we don't have a full-time staff member at the facility like Monday to Friday. We have, our entire Parks and Facility Services team are cross-trained. So when interments happen or when there's maintenance that has to be done, because people have made note of this earlier this year, we've had some graves that have kind of caved in or whatever, and you have to go do maintenance that's well above and beyond just the lawn care contract. The plowing of roads in the wintertime, having to deal with trees and debris, all of the leaves in the fall, so on and so forth. That's the Parks and Facility Services team as a whole that do that. And all of the guys are cross-trained, so depending on what day it is, who might be on holidays or whatever, everybody knows how to make sure that they can dig a grave properly and go through that whole process as well. A couple of our guys are trained very well in the whole process of dealing with families who might be in a state of grieving but still having to deal with the process for a loved one, and actually meeting at the cemetery office and going through the process of purchasing a plot and so on and so forth. So it's fairly labor intensive in other areas more than just cutting grass.
Councillor Kentner.
So I appreciate that we're taking a fair bit of time on this, but this is the time. I really would like to just raise one other thing. You say that there is sort of that ongoing presence, but I can think of one tombstone that is right beside the road that fell down about 2 years ago. It was down when I started campaigning. I showed you the pictures of it a year ago maybe. It's still down. I get the impression that it will never be, corrected. And it wouldn't be a job for two guys either. Like, it will take some effort to correct this, but it is a symbol of neglect and disrespect. And as I say, hundreds of people pass that, every time they go through the cemetery. So how do we fix that kind of a problem?
Through your worship, I think, I kind of touched on this, that, prior to amalgamation, 3 full-time plus a summer student. Prior to changes in 2016, we've had discussions internally, because Matt deals with the cemetery stuff from the legislative side. It's my responsibility because Parks and Facility Services is in my portfolio. And we'll touch on this more in the report, but in reality, clearly we believe what the real issue here is that in the past, there were full-time staff always there. So part of the job that those staff did was the lawn care maintenance and maintaining the grounds and doing checks and so on and so forth. But the thing that has really changed the whole scope of service is that when those staff weren't doing that, because it wasn't, a 2,000 hour a year kind of job, they were simply there for customer service. And people dislike that that is no longer a customer service location where an individual couldn't just stop up and see Mark at the office. Now you have to call, you have to book an appointment, and it's a by appointment only. So when our staff are dealing with the individual that needs to be dealt with, it's still the same service. The difference is that there is no general customer service up there. That's one of the real big differences in how the service has changed through the service delivery process.
But that doesn't answer my question about a toppled monument. And there have been many, but...
So through your worship, so for a toppled monument, I mean, if it's not a direct family member and it's yourself, ultimately the way to deal with this is to get a hold of Parks and Facility Services, to lay out a location, where it is, and make a request, and it effectively becomes a work order for staff to deal with, as they can. It's unfortunate that that one hasn't been dealt with yet, and I don't know why it hasn't. It's something that I'll follow up with again, this week. But, like I said, it's the exact same staff now that were there 3 years ago. So the level of care from a customer service and from a facility perspective really ought not have changed. It's simply that we have contractors doing the grass cutting instead of a summer student. That's really the big difference.
Thanks, Mr. Chapman. I'm just going to go to Matt first.
Through your worship, just sort of to suggest that a lot of this will perhaps become clearer when the report is done, because I know that Darcy's team will develop a report that's very similar to the one that you've received today about non-winter road maintenance, that sort of lays out the hours and the tasks and so on, and that will sort of establish the threshold that then council will be able to have these conversations about where you'd like that threshold to differ, because we'll be able to put a much better sort of tangible hour and cost on these things.
Okay, thank you for that. Matt, do you have something else to add then?
If I may, just in the summer road maintenance report, I distinctly heard you say that the best way to get the best job done is to have our own people doing it. And this is what our ratepayers are telling us about the cemetery too. So I really urge you to consider the possibility whether more, involvement by our own people isn't the answer in the long run.
Thank you for that. And one more quick one, and then I'll call a question.
Very briefly, no, I'm really looking forward to this report. I think it'll be coming forward at a very, very good time. I appreciate the discussion and the information from staff. And on the basis of this report and past comments that we've received, I can pretty well guarantee that in 2 months, when we get talking about the budget, this one's going to come back.
Thank you for that. All in favor of this motion going forward, and those against? That is carried. Okay, alternative public transportation services. Councillor Bell, this was yours. So you wish to put that on the table? Can I have a seconder, please, for that? Deputy Mayor? And Tony, over to you. Do you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To my fellow councillors, if you look down in my motion onto the third whereas from the top reading down, it says that council recognizes that some members of our community find it difficult to access stores and services due to their personal financial situation. And the council wishes to explore alternatives to conventional transit to assist those members of our community. And I'll speak to that line about those members. But therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Meaford direct staff to bring back a report outlining the costs and processes involved in establishing a taxi token scheme for low-income residents, and that the report also include options for expanding specialized transit service to include those with financial needs in addition to accessibility needs. To the comment about those members, every one of us in the municipality of Meaford had an opportunity to go on the conventional transit and spend $2 and go for a ride. And we did not avail ourselves of doing that. And the report that we just had simply says that the ridership was very low, and ultimately a few minutes ago, that's going to end. And so to that end, to support those members of our community that find themselves basically falling through the crack, that they don't really have a disability, they can't get a doctor's note, but they have a need. And when it says down below about coming up with a taxi token scheme, yes, I've got some ideas on that, how that might work. But really this notice of motion that I've brought forward here tonight for consideration is I really do look forward to how staff perceive how that could work and to bring that back. But really, we are talking, when we're using the private sector, we would be talking about subsidization to the local taxi companies. And that is what we're really talking about. And I have given some consideration to the financial impact of it. I remember the meeting before when Councillor Vickers asked the Treasurer basically about the conventional transit system. I think Mr. Chapman, there was numbers like 120,000, maybe as high as 130,000. My desire on this to help those members of our community, I think that we can do this for a whole lot less and help them get around. And anyway, that's what I'm thinking on this, that between expanding that service with our specialized transit and with staff being able to come back with a report that could maybe help them use the local taxi system, that's what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I would like to thank Councillor Bell, and I'd like to speak in support of this motion. And I think Mary Silva, who has a letter in our correspondence package, speaks to this better than I certainly could. She's an individual who counts on the bus and utilizes it to visit her daughter in the hospital and to do her trips to the grocery store and doctors and so on. So that is the type of person who will really benefit from any sort of partnership with a taxi service or whoever this falls out. So I'm appreciative that something will come before us again to consider. So what I'd like to ask in the meantime, between now and when the report comes back, is there any option or opportunity to continue to lease the current bus for another month, or is there something we can do sort of immediately to help the people, the handful of people who really do count on the current bus service?
Through your worship, no. Council has passed a resolution to stop the bus service. If council did not wish to do that, then they should not have passed that resolution. Councillor Bell has brought forward a suggestion for an alternative thing. If members of the community wish to apply for the specialised transit, then they should do. If they are eligible, then they will receive a card to be able to use our specialised transit bus. If they're determined not to be eligible, there is an appeal mechanism in place through the Accessibility Advisory Committee. And we will bring forward a report with other alternatives as requested should council pass this motion.
Thanks, Matt. Councillor Vickers.
Through your worship, I looked at this and I question whether it's a lower tier responsibility, and that is a question. Is this more of a county responsibility? The community living organization and a few of the organizations that the county helps look after, is this their spot? Like, is this our responsibility as the municipality of Meaford, or is this more of a county responsibility to make sure that all people have access to transportation?
Rob.
Yeah, thank you. Through your worship, as noted earlier, the County of Grey has actually hired a person to look at transit comprehensively. They're looking at different types of transit, not only regional transit, but a transit system that can work for Grey County as well. They will be consulting with all the municipalities on the go forward. So concurrent with your comment, we will be working with them on looking what options may work here. I know that they've been down, not saying it would work here, but they've been looking at the Wellington Rideshare program. Wellington County Rideshare program is And that would have to be administered at a county level. We don't have the opportunity to administer it, so going forward, it's something we'll explore with them.
Darcy?
Through your worship, I also think it's important to note that, you know, for individuals such as what Deputy Mayor Keaveney has brought up, there is Home and Community Support Services of Grey Bruce, who also provides transit similar to our specialized, but they also have, you know, their mandate is really any barrier. So if individuals have a financial barrier, they can qualify for this service to the point where they may actually get fully subsidized service for this. So the number for Home and Community Support Services is 519-372-2091. Again, 519-372-2091. So call Home and Community Support Services. They'll take you through an intake process, and if you qualify, then you can use their service. And the benefit of their service is that it can go from like 7 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, and also Saturdays and Sundays, whereas ours was very limited. So, and again, this is door-to-door service as well, instead of having to go to a bus stop. So, you know, people who might find themselves in a bit of a bind until the county does something, or at least until we bring a report back with alternatives as per Councillor Bell's suggestion, please reach out to Home and Community Support Services.
So the best we can do right now for those folks who have reached out to us, and I've got a list of those folks who now would use the bus if it was continued, is to pass this message along, this phone number to them, to phone and register with Home and Community Support Services for transportation within our community as well as broader, within the broader communities region. So anything further then, Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just a thought crossed. The group that looks after our sports money that is set aside for people that cannot afford sports,
Golden Town.
is it, the Golden Town, is it being utilized to the extent of it?
Through your worship, yes, absolutely. Council's actually going to get a report in July, which will talk about sort of the numbers that have been using that. But yes, we're going through that money fairly effectively.
Okay, I was hoping if we weren't going through that, we could shoulder this onto that the same way. Thank you.
Good thought. Okay, anything further? And I'll call the question. All in favor of this motion going forward? And that is carried. Okay, we're moving into the adoption of the minutes. A special council meeting on June the 3rd and June the 4th, 2019. Could I have a mover and a seconder to put that? Councillor Kentner, Councillor Greenfield. Any comments, questions on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Closed meeting on June the 10th, 2019. Mover and a seconder, please put that on the table. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Bell, all in favor? And that is carried. And down to communications. Is there anything within the communications list? Councillor, or Deputy Mayor? F, please. F. And I have one quick one on C. Okay, anything further? All right. Shirley, do you want to go first? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. F is a letter from AMP, the Advocates for Memorial Park, and they have several requests listed in their letter, and I may have to revisit a notice of motion, Your Worship, if it's felt that that's the best way to approach this. But there's a little bit of a time crunch involved here because they are requesting the opportunity to use the community center for another public meeting, and they are hoping to hold this on July the 16th. And I know this group would like to get that announcement out into the public through the media and through the municipal website and newsletter and so on. So I'm not sure what the best way is to handle this, but I will put that over to staff, I guess, to speak to how we might answer the requests of this group.
Okay, thank you for that. Matt, over
Thank
to
you, Madam Mayor. As this is an item on the communications list, Council is completely within their rights to pass the motion about this today. The reason we do notices of motion followed by motions for consideration is because members of the public don't know that you're going to talk about something if you just bring it up and pass a motion there and then. Because this is on the agenda, members of the public know you're going to talk about it, so you're perfectly within your rights to do so. However, before you do so, I'd just like to make some comments on this before you decide whether you wish to go forward or not. The municipality's hired professional consultants to develop a master plan for Memorial Park, and that contract included very specific requirements for technical expertise. Those consultants have conducted public consultation in a number of ways and a number of forums over really now a 9-month period, and the comment period has, at Council's direction, been extended until September. The municipal newsletter, which will come out in July, will include details of that extension to the consultation period. As a municipality, we do not and we should not provide funding or free rentals to advocacy groups. We also do not share information that's been provided to the municipality and our contractors with expectations of confidentiality. Any public information that's been given to us here has been done so with the expectation that the municipality uses it, not external organisations. We do not and should not allow advocacy groups to use our municipal publications to promote a specific cause. If we do this, it sets a precedent that other groups will expect the ability to add content to municipal documents and receive funding for their pet projects. In addition, it will appear that this group speaks on behalf of the municipality, which it doesn't. The Memorial Park Master Plan is not about operational issues, as I mentioned in this document. Should residents or campers have issues regarding maintenance of the park, they should contact the Parks and Facilities team, who will conduct necessary maintenance or request funding from Council for future maintenance projects if necessary. The operations of the park are very different from the development of a Memorial Park Master Plan for the next 25 years. From my point of view, and I'm speaking from myself as the clerk, not the municipality as a whole, I strongly urge Council that this is a slippery slope to go down should you accede to these requests.
Thank you for that, Matt. Any comments from Councillor Kentner?
I don't really want to speak first because I haven't thought a lot, but I have had reservations about this from basically on the points that our clerk has raised. I think that all people should be on an equal playing field when it comes to providing their input to this. And this group, which I don't think is necessarily a disadvantaged group, is asking us for help with their presentation that no other individual or interested party has. And I think they're extremely capable and that they will bring forth excellent information and viewpoints. But I think it muddies the water if we support it to the degree they're asking for.
Thank you for that, Ross. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And the Memorial Park Master Plan is very important. It's a 25-year plan. It has to be done right, and I voted to extend this so that this group could get together and bring their thoughts forward, and I hope we use them. But like our clerk has said, they're a group, and I want to hear from them, but they should be on their own. We should not sponsor them. We should not advocate them, because it opens up a whole can of worms for every other group that may have an issue. I strongly believe this is a good group. I know they're a good group, and I want to hear from them, but I think they should be on their own. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bartley. Is there anything further? Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Mr. Smith, I guess, or Mr. Armstrong, has this group made a formal application to rent the community center? Have they done anything like that yet?
Through Your Worship, they haven't.
Okay. Well, there is, Councillor,
Through your worship,
sorry,
just-
Mr. Chapman.
Because history is always a good thing. And a couple of members of council that are sitting around this table were not here last year. But in May of last year, a report came forward to council asking council to postpone some capital projects that they had previously provided authority to move forward with through the budget process. And part of the report also provided direction for staff to engage a consultant in developing a master plan. In the body of the report, it actually talks about exactly what the master plan was going to do and what we were going to ask the consultant for. What we're going to be looking at. Most importantly, it was very clear in that report, there were 9 tasks that were clearly set out as to what the consultant was supposed to do. And task 6 was Public Information Center, a single public information center, which the municipality has done. And more importantly, we've had specific engagement sessions with various groups on top of all of that. And now council on top of that has also extended a commenting period for an extra 3 months. So we developed a process based on what we told council we were going to do. And now we're extending that process. And now the public is asking for yet even more. And this goes far outside what we would normally do. Remember, for those of you that were here, we developed this process much like an EA. So if we were talking about a $2 million bridge right now, we would not be having multiple public information centers. We'd have one. And that was why we developed this process much like an EA.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chapman. There is still opportunity for the public to continue to provide comments, and I know that we all want to hear what everyone thinks through the public process. But okay, we're at this now. Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Deputy Mayor, for bringing this forward. So, members of this group who will contact members of council, our comments back to them are, you can do this meeting and you can call it whatever you want to do, but you got to rent the place. Is that where we're at?
They're an advocacy group.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, we don't need to move forward with that then. Item C was Meaford Business and Improvement Area Board, just to mention that the mayor, sorry.
Through your worship, should we answer their letter and just say, for very good and sufficient reasons, we look forward to your input, but we do not, pardon me, we're not in a position to, fulfill your wish list?
Okay.
Yeah, we can reply.
We can do that. We'll certainly reply back to them. Thank you for that. Okay, so just to go back then to the BIA board meeting of May the 29th, just that the mayor was in attendance. That's all that I wanted to make note of. Okay, so we're down to the confirming bylaw. Mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Councillor Bell and Councillor Bartley, all in favor? And that is carried. And that completes the business of this agenda, and I declare the meeting adjourned at 5:26. Wow, getting better. I just did. Just that the mayor was in attendance in the minutes.